Okay, so hi everyone. We are live with this webinar and I can see the attendee count increasing. We have nearly 350 attendees now and yeah, okay. Really glad to see this. So I'm super excited to present this webinar on role of ChatGPT and other AI tools in academic publishing. We're discussing if it's an opportunity or a threat. A big thank you to all the panelists here, and I'll be giving a short introduction to the panelists across the session. So let's begin. Next slide. So first, before we go through the webinar, let me introduce who we are. So we are Inago, one of the world's leading author services provider. We've assisted more than 2 million authors in 125 countries. We have local operations in 15 countries. And we're market leaders in Japan, China, Korea, and Latin. We cover all subject areas, including medicine, life sciences, economics, physical sciences, and engineering. And under our portfolio, we have author services, author education, e-learning platforms, Crimson AI, and medical communications. Inago Academy is the author education arm of Inago. We are experts in scholarly communication with a passion to help researchers achieve publication success. We have a rich and diverse portfolio of more than 5,000 in-depth knowledge resources, and we aim to aid researchers in meeting their goals and advancing their research careers. We've also conducted more than 250 successful workshops and more than 350 live webinars for our clients, primarily publishers, universities, and institutions. We've also developed Inago Learn. It's a structured, flexible, and certified online learning platform for researchers that enables them to enrich their research skills and enhance their career growth. So this is Inago Academy. We recently launched under Inago Academy a free blogging platform for all the researchers. Just giving you some information about this. So we will share more information about the blogging platform after the webinar, but this is something that all researchers that are attending this webinar can definitely take an opportunity to submit their articles to. Under Inago Training Academy, we deliver workshops and webinars. This is what we just discussed under the portfolio of Inago. So this is again an opportunity for any of the universities. If you're looking for a series of webinars or for your students or peers or faculty, just visit the page mentioned here, and there'll be an URL given on the chat too. So just visit that page and see if you have any requirements that we can fulfill. Alternatively, if you wish to propel your speaking career, as a researcher, as an experienced researcher, we also have a call for speakers page where we use these speakers' expertise for an audience that is related to workshops and webinars. So feel free to give us your information and we will get in touch with you. So these are just some of the opportunities we have for this audience. And now we begin with the webinar. So with me, I have 3 expert panelists and a technical advisor. We'll start with Dr. Roger Watson. One second. Yes. So Roger has over 30 years of experience in academic writing and publishing. He has been an advocate for the use of AI in academic publishing and has recently co-authored a blog post on the official website of Committee on Publication Ethics. He has also emphasized the benefits and challenges of using generative AI tools such as ChatGPT in scholarly communication and has emphasized the need for ethical considerations and transparency when using AI in publishing. He is the editor-in-chief of Nurse Education in Practice and former editor-in-chief of Journal of Advanced Nursing. His other current affiliations also include the president of National Conference of University Professors, and he is the editorial board member of the Wiki Journal of Medicine. He also has honorary faculty and visiting positions in Australia, Ireland, Saudi Arabia, and China. In 2022, Roger was conferred with the Margaret Comerford Freda Award for editorial leadership in nursing publication by the International Academy of Nursing Editors. Thank you, Roger, for being on this panel. Extremely delighted. Next, we have Chavi. Chavi is a renowned global leader in responsible tech and scientific research. She is a passionate advocate for the responsible use of technology and its impact on vulnerable populations. She has authored and contributed to several publications related to AI ethics, including white papers on promoting academic industry partnerships in digital pathology and healthcare, case studies on biased algorithmic decision systems, and a review article on the ethics of AI in pathology. Not only this, she has been named in the top 100 marquee and seasoned AI and analytics leaders, influencers, and practitioners for the year 2022, the 100 Brilliant Women in AI Ethics 2022 list by Women in AI Ethics, and the AI Makers 150 Top 150 AI and Analytics Leaders and Influencers 2021 list. Currently, Chavi is on the board of directors for several prestigious organizations such as the American Society for Investigative Pathology, Digital Pathology Association, and Society for Scholarly Publishing. Welcome, Chavi, to this panel. Thank you so much. All right. Then we have Trinka. Trinka is the lead linguist at Crimson AI with a passion for language and a strong commitment to using natural language processing technology to reduce linguistic barriers to the effective communication of knowledge. Her extensive experience and understanding of the language technology interface has led to the creation of tools that help researchers and writers worldwide. She heads a team of language experts who work on Trinka AI, a next-gen grammar correction and language enhancement writing assistant designed specifically for academic and technical writing. Welcome to the panel, Trinka. Delighted to have you. And finally, we have Apurva. Apurva is a principal data scientist at Crimson AI. He has around 10 plus years of experience in natural processing. As a core team member, Apurva played a key role in building Trinka AI tool. Apurva has worked as a machine learning scientist at GeoHaptic AI, where he was involved in designing end-to-end architectures for chatbots. Apurva initially worked as a research assistant at Goa University, where he worked on several NLP projects for Indian languages, which were funded by the government of India. In addition, he has several research publications in his name and has been invited to speak at several research conferences and workshops related to AI. Welcome, Apurva. Thank you so much for being here. And as for me, I'm a licensed specialist in physical medicine and rehabilitation by qualification and a scholarly publishing professional by vocation. I've been working in and around the editorial paradigm for 16 years now and actively mentor and train academic professionals. I've also led several projects relating to fulfilling newer requirements of clients and publishers by enhancing editorial, peer review systems, and author services of Inago. I'm a member of scholarly associations such as COPE, ISMT, and EASE, which focus on the betterment of the researcher community and help establish best practices amongst publishers and journal peaks. So thank you so much, everyone, to be on the panel. And so, yes, I think we have around 500 attendees. It's good to go, I think. So cool. Let's focus on the agenda for the webinar, guys. So today we're going to be talking about introduction to large language models, AI tools for scientific writing, ethical research integrity concerns, role of AI tools in decision-making, and human editing versus ChatGPT editing. So these are the primary areas that we're going to be talking about in the session. But overall, we're open to any questions or any suggestions that the audience might have, and feel free to use the Q&A section at the bottom. And feel free to use that section, and the team will collect all the questions for the panelists to answer. So let's get going. Yes, this is about that. Okay. All right. So quickly introducing large language models to the audience. What is a large language model? A large language model, or LLM, is a neural network with billions of parameters trained on vast amounts of unlabeled text using self-supervised or semi-supervised learning. So basically, if you see the diagram below, it basically requires text input, which is then delivered to the language model. The language model processes it based on several inputs, and then you either get a text output or a numeric representation of the text that is useful for different systems. Now, the systems include semantics, it can include logical reasoning, it could include coding. So different systems can be processed through a large language model. History of large language models has been there since the last 40 years. Okay, so it's not a new concept. It has been in and around our existence from the last 40 to 50 years. And it started with ELIZA, and right now we are talking about GPT. GPT itself has been in existence for the last 3 to 4 years. Currently, we are talking about GPT from the point of view of the hype that it has created, primarily because it has become extremely easy to use. And the ChatGPT model, which is currently based on GPT-4, is extremely easy to use for consumers, and it has sped up a lot of productive processes around the world. For the sake of this webinar, we are going to stick to the points and facts about scholarly publishing and how AI, basically generative AI tools, how they can be used or not be used for scholarly publishing. Next slide. These are some of the types of large language models that are currently available. So GPT falls under the pre-trained model. The audience also must have heard about DALI, BERT, and other such models. They are different types of large language models, and the requirements are completely different. Here, I would just ask Apurva from our technical experts team to quickly tell us a little bit more about large language models for the audience. Apurva?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks, Anupama. So yeah, I mean, the evolution of large language models came into picture like recently, like that is in 2022, after OpenAI came up with this ChatGPT tool. Before that, like if you talk about the dynamics or the architecture of these large language models, then they are derived from transformer architecture, which was basically designed by Google's team back in 2017. And transformer has two modules or two components. One is encoder component, another is decoder component. So all these language models which are there right now in market are primarily they comprise these two components. Either they are built using encoder module or like decoder module or combination of both. If you see here, then like in this diagram you see something called as T5 there. Then T5 is primarily built on both the modules, that is encoder and decoder, whereas GPT is primarily on decoder modules. Whereas BERT and Roberta are primarily built using encoder model. So now, this architectures are used to train this model, and with this architecture, you use a lot of data to fine tune them or to train them. As I mentioned that this modules were there before as well, but what changed now is something called as this OpenAI people introduce reinforcement mechanism in it. So if you see like what happens at the time of training of this ChatGPT model or GPT-4, that you train it on a lot of data, and once you have this pre-trained model, then you use this model to fine tune it on some sort of supervised data set.
Correct.
And once you train it using the supervised training data,
Hmm.
then you incorporate humans feedback into it so that the accuracy or the performance of the model is further improved. And it's an ongoing process. As you
Okay.
use this tool, you take the human feedback into the model and then retrain it to make it even better.
All right.
So
Thank you.
yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Apurva. We can go to the next
Thank you.
slide. So yes, I mean, like Apurva mentioned, the LLMs, OpenAI in specific, they're trained on large data sets. It processes natural language data, and currently it is revolutionizing the field of natural language processing. Now, the most popular application is OpenAI's ChatGPT, which uses the generative pre-trained transformer language model, which is what something Apurva just explained, and it generates text by predicting the next word in a sequence. Plus, it works on prompt engineering, which is primarily human-derived. So human prompts make ChatGPT or applications like ChatGPT better. This is extremely important to understand for the audience because later on the questions are also going to be related to how safe is the data or how safe are the prompts that are going to be entered into ChatGPT to make it better, or how safe is your unpublished data, right? So this is extremely important to understand. Thanks for that, Apurva. Yes. So before we begin with the webinar, I would like the audience to take a quick poll for us to understand what exactly is the baseline. So the poll question is, how do you envision generative AI being used in academic publishing workflows? So the options are discovery and outlining, researching and literature review, writing and curing writer's block, translation and summarizing, and editing and paraphrasing. So I think all audience members have the poll right in front of them. And yes, you all can proceed with voting. We have 2 minutes we'll give for this poll and then we'll close the poll. Please vote now, audience. So any predictions, speakers? Chavi, do you have any predictions? Let's make it interesting.
Yeah. So I'm not sure about the makeup of this audience, but I'm thinking translation and summarization and editing and paraphrasing may come up from the current audience, although I have my own votes, which I'm not going to share yet.
Yes, fair enough. Roger, do you have any predictions?
Yes, I know. I think writing and curing writer's block is what people are going to use it for.
Okay.
We'll see, we've got a competition. The game's on.
I am so glad that your options are quite different. Trinka, what do you think?
I think it's 2, 3, 4, and 5.
2, 3.
Researching, finding the
so
studies.
except one, everything else.
I think to a small extent, one, but not that prominent. 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Okay, all right. So let's wait for a couple of maybe 10 seconds more, and then we can close the poll. I hope everyone is waiting. No, so the audience has to be voting on the poll and not on the chat section or the Q&A section, where I see some of them saying all of them. Okay, I think we can close the poll now. Can we see the results? Oh,
Yes.
just look at that. Okay, so the majority is editing and paraphrasing, yeah, followed by researching and literature review. Translation, summarization is a close third, and the least is discovery and outlining. But what's worthy to mention here is that the margins are not very different, right, across all the options. So there is no, I'm not sure if there is a clear majority, but yeah, I mean, the maximum votes, and we have 372 votes, so that's a good number. All right, I'm going to close the poll now. Yes. Okay, let's move on. So yes, so basically from a scientific writing point of view, now that we have established, researchers are definitely experimenting with ChatGPT. We, as a panel here, expert panelists here based on our experience, and we're also pro responsible AI, we're pro ethical AI. Let's discuss some important questions. So these are the questions that we will be discussing. What should the extent of use of generative AI be, or AI assisted technologies be, in scientific writing? So this is something that all of us wonder at some point. I think it has become clearer with time, but say 3 months ago, even I used to wonder, what should be the extent of use of AI in scientific writing? So yeah, I would like the panelists to speak for this question. So Chavi, we'll start with you. According to you, what should be the extent of use of generative AI and AI-assisted devices in writing?
So I think, Anupama, it was a good idea to have that poll early on, because that sort of set the baseline,
Correct.
And I was really heartened to see that a lot of people were coming up with the first option, which was like detailing and outlining. And as Roger had mentioned earlier, being able to overcome that writer's block.
Right.
And if folks have written in the, in the audience before, they would realize taking that first step is the most difficult process, right? So if you send a prompt to ChatGPT to come up with an outline to sort of get you started, I think that's a good use of generative AI. If you want to synthesize, and I'm going to the entire extreme, because I want to give other panelists a chance to talk and hear their views. Yes. But if you want them to synthesize a discussion for your research paper, perhaps that may not be the most may not be the best use of using an AI tool, because it would lack the perspective of the researcher. It would lack the understanding of the experiments that you have failed in. Like, I was a researcher in my former life, and from my experience, I can tell that 80% of the experiments fail. And that's a learning experience, because that data never gets published. So the machine or the algorithm is not going to have a perspective into the things that do not work in the context of an experiment, and will not be able to synthesize a good discussion. Right. So I think I'll pause there to hear other views.
Yes, I agree. I think it would also not be able to process novel research, would it? Because AI learns from previously available data or existing data.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
That's one of the limitations. Trinka, would you like to go on this question? Would you like to share your perspective?
Yeah, so from the extent point of view, generative AI has a lot of benefits. It can substantially reduce the time involved in discovering past literature and drafting papers, like Chavi mentioned, outlining it and then using that as a starting point, right? Summarization is a really good thing, because it saves you a lot of time. You can read the summaries, and then select what papers you want to thoroughly read and build your literature collection.
Correct.
And because you come across a lot of technical concepts across the domains, you would want an explanation quickly, maybe in plain language. So you get a nice layperson looking explanation of a very difficult term that can help in understanding different papers and different concepts. But whatever ChatGPT does, I'd like to borrow a phrase from Neil Gaiman, so one of his Twitter posts, where he says what it does, it boils down to information-shaped sentences. So using it, although it has a lot of benefits, it does really give you a productive tool to work on, right? But you have to be very careful. It has to be validated. We cannot entirely depend on AI tools for a study or research.
All right. But can you depend on it completely from a summarization point of view too? Because that's like a very easy shortcut. I have heard otherwise. So I'm sort of trying to understand how accurate it is from a summarization point of view.
Its accuracy, I mean, it could be, let's say, it may work, it may not work. So that goes with the risk of all AI tools, because of that black box phenomenon. You don't know how it is arriving at that conclusion or that outcome or the output for you to consume.
Exactly.
So that is always going to be there, no matter how high or how great the performance of any AI tool is.
Right. And you have to be really great at prompts, right? For it to be very specific and accurate. A lot of us, tend to improve our prompts from a questions point of view with experience. But I think it probably takes time. But of course, I agree that I think if it's already published and if there are no paywalls from the papers that you're summarizing, then I think the feature can be used. Roger, do you have a take on this?
Yes, not much more to add, because I think most of it's been said, but I think within the context of a particular scientific paper, I think writing the background section and the introduction sections it's a useful tool for that kind of thing, but it's not going to help you to write up a novel study, as you said, because it's not there for it to find the information on, unless you use other tools like SciSpace, where you can actually put in that information and get it to summarize it. There are other tools you can use alongside these things, but I think the extent is is probably quite limited, really, in helping you to sort of summarize existing knowledge and just giving you a framework for how to lay out an introduction. But of course, I'm sure we'll pick this up later. It's got to then be read very, very carefully in order to make sure it makes sense, and it depends very much. The extent to which it's useful is the extent, and you said this, Chavi, the extent to which you ask, sorry, you said this, Priyanka, the extent to which you ask sensible questions, that you learn to use it properly. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I think the audience, from the questions that we've received before the webinar, I think many of them are aware of the benefits. I don't think many of them are aware of the disadvantages or the frequently observed issues. So let's go to the next question. My question for the panel is, what are the most frequently observed issues in AI generated text? We can discuss about the most obvious ones and not so obvious ones. So Chavi, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I think one of the first ones I want to mention is, for me, it has been quite underwhelming, and maybe I'm not a good prompt generator yet.
Right.
But the response has been very underwhelming for me. So the text that gets synthesized by ChatGPT to me sounds sort of boring, maybe because I'm used to seeing a lot of articles that have perspectives from the authors, and they synthesize the field in such a way because they're aware of the recent developments, like you mentioned earlier, Anupama, right? So ChatGPT would have limited bandwidth in generating answers based on the text that it has been trained on. But each one of us goes to so many scientific conferences, for example. You listen to these new talks, you know what's up and coming in the field, you see what the trends are, and then that's how you hypothesize a problem. That's how you approach a hypothesis to come to different, to design different experiments and come to different conclusions.
Exactly.
So I feel like that stimulating scientific insight seems to be missing. And in my opinion, it sort of generates a boring text. And like Trinka had mentioned earlier in our discussion, ChatGPT or former versions would synthesize repetitive text in their summary. Although that has gone down with the changes coming, but to me, it still lacks the novelty and the insight that a human researcher would put on on paper.
Yes, I think I completely agree. And especially, say, if I'm a peer reviewer and if I look at, supposedly an AI generated text, I think I can sort of make out that it is generated by machine if it is completely unaltered. Similarly, emails that are written by machines are completely different from what we as humans tend to write. So yeah, that is one of the issues. Yes. Roger, would you like to answer this question too? Anything that you have experienced? Yes.
Yeah. Well, my experience of just playing about with these tools is that you sometimes run the risk of generating nonsense. It looks good, it reads in what's good English, but in actual fact, you read it and you realize actually that doesn't really mean anything. No. So it's just like a word salad of things that's pulled together. And I think that probably is more common with very complex and technical questions than general questions. It certainly has it's well known to have a sort of political bias in one direction. I'm not going to get into political discussions now, but if you enter into sensitive topics, it can be a little bit, it can scold you and say you shouldn't be saying that, or you shouldn't be asking that question, or whatever. So anything to do with gender, race, it can get very it appears to get sensitive about these things. Of course, it's not really getting sensitive. It's picking up ideas about this somewhere else. So some areas of research might find it difficult to generate appropriate text. I also find that it puts in references to other work and things like that, which are completely wrong now and again.
Yes.
So you've just got to be aware of these things and just remove them. I think that's and if you use it once, ask it a question once and go back in 5 minutes later, you'll get a completely a very different piece of text generated. So I think another problem is, which one do I use? Do I keep going until I get something that's really good? And I don't know why it does that. I don't understand the technical aspects of it, but it doesn't give the same answer each time. And I think for somebody inexperienced, that could be quite confusing.
Right. So I think we'll discuss bias in the next segment of ethics, but I completely agree with the fake references. I have tried this myself and some of my team members too. It has generated references that do not exist, fake names, fake URLs, fake journals even. I am not sure how does it get this data, because it has to be existing data. I don't know whether it refers to predatory publishers or journals, data sets that are hidden in dark web. I'm not sure of anything of this, but it does generate a lot of fake references that require a fair amount of fact checking. So this is something that all the audience members of this webinar should keep in mind. Although it might resolve some of your ideation issues, right, by giving you some ideas or by giving you some pointers, but the things that it generates, specifically ChatGPT, are still not reliable. So you would still have to apply your mind, or you have to maybe discuss them, or you have to approach a professional for guidance. This is something that you still have to do before even think of submitting your work to any kinds of publication and incurring losses of different kinds. So let's go to the next question, because so far we have discussed some areas that it can be used and some areas that it definitely should not be used. So that there are high risk areas for researchers, like, for example, referencing literature, etc. And similarly, low risk, like, for example, the outline of research or a draft based on existing data. So can the panel quickly tell the audience what do they think are the high risk areas for researchers in using ChatGPT, and what are the low risk ones? Trinka, will go with you first. Trinka, you're on mute if you're speaking.
Sorry about that.
No problem.
So yeah, so the main problem, which has been mentioned earlier, making up information, making up references. I think that because of that, it's a very high risk. If you depend only on such tools to write out your paper or to draft your study, then that is a huge risk. And one thing I've noticed also while playing around with ChatGPT was that certain critical information would get deleted or changed, like numbers. Now, numbers are very important, although simple. It can be dangerous. It can cost lives if numbers are, for example, if it's related to dosages. Actually, I had come across some of these happening in ChatGPT. And I would say that when it comes to any high impact or the goal is for any practical purpose, then it should not be used alone. That is a very huge risk. Low risk areas would be more of searching literature, or I think even making complex text readable for understanding purposes. This is for me a low risk, but I always say whether it's low risk or it's high risk, it's always a good thing to validate what output you're getting. A simple change in just the preposition or a synonym of a word, can change the entire meaning, can give a polar meaning or also the impact. And no author wants this.
Yes. At this point, I wanted to quickly tell the audience that I have a couple of examples of the ChatGPT introduced errors at the end of the webinar. So do stay for the end of the webinar. I have those examples, and we'll quickly discuss this in two areas. One is medicine and one is economics. Both affect a lot of lives, like Trinka said. So yeah, we have a couple of examples. Thanks, Trinka. Chavi, would you like to add to what Trinka said?
So I just want to add the element of stewardship. A lot of people here in the audience are from a scholarly publishing or academic publishing world. So we know whatever information gets published in renowned, reputable journals has been peer reviewed by human experts in that particular domain. So, they're putting their it's anonymous peer review, but people are putting their capability behind the line, to publish some new information and to disseminate that. So as Trinka mentioned, if these tools are used alone without the human intervention, without the supervision of an expert, then what the scholarly publishing community would be doing would be spreading misinformation and disinformation.
Yes.
And from a ton of articles that are coming out that I'm reading, once the information is out there, despite the fact that you can have you can pull the articles back. There could be different, new articles issued. There's updates on those articles. The information sort of stays ingrained into the minds of the individuals.
Absolutely.
Which can further lead to lay the foundation for research that may not go anywhere. So I think we have to be very careful in making sure there's a human in the loop, even if the algorithm was used for generating the outline, something as basic as that, right? And then the other question, and I was just noticing the questions that came in the chat, so I want to sort of pick on one of those.
Sure.
Somebody asked about whether or not AI should be used as a reviewer 1, reviewer 2, or perhaps even reviewer 3. So my question to you would be, do you not trust the expertise of your reviewers that your system or your editorial team has selected to give a particular score, or to select to review the article based on their expertise? Why is there a need for an AI to review? And as Trinka mentioned before, it's good at generating summaries, and Roger and Anupma, you touched upon this, and also Apurva, you mentioned it's reinforcement learning. So the algorithm is only going to synthesize stuff based on what it has seen before. There's not going to be elements of novelty. So it's never going to be a human expert. So why should there be a need for that algorithm to act as a reviewer? So I would emphasize the need of keeping human in the loop, and also relying on human expertise as reviewers, and us being stewards of the data that is getting published to lay as the foundation for the next set of research. So please do not be spreading misinformation or disinformation using these tools.
Exactly. Thank you, Chavi. I think the impact of disseminating wrong results or incorrect science is probably the highest impact that I think we could think of from a researcher point of view. I'm only glad that this wasn't there when we had COVID, in 2020, because without AI tools, there was a lot of fake research circulated and, lives were compromised. We can only imagine how machinizing everything could have resulted in more losses and maybe, vaccine production or the efficacy of vaccines and things like that. So thanks, Chavi, for touching upon that. I'd like to take a question from one of the audience members at this point, which found it very interesting. The audience member asks, one second, it's just gone up. Can someone find the question about review? Yes, sorry. It was about meta-analysis. Can ChatGPT be helpful in quantitative research synthesis as practiced in meta-analysis? Would any of the panelists like to answer this question? It's a specific type of study, so I think the audience member wants to know.
Can I say something? I'll say something.
Sure.
I don't know very much about this, but I do know that there's a group of people in Slovenia working on this very question.
Interesting.
At the moment, the study hasn't actually received its funding yet, but they have a proposal to look into precisely doing that. So, and these people are health informatics people. They know about AI and all sorts of things around this more than I peripherally associated with the project and quality control. So I think the answer to that question is yes, it can be. And they want to look into the possibilities for that. So, but I don't know if anything exists at the moment.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Roger. We'll go to the next. Yes, sorry.
No, I was just saying, I wonder if MATLAB sort of does that, in the current state, but it's not one of the large language models, I believe. I may not have the technical knowledge on that, but MATLAB does generate quantitative data and analytics.
Okay, sure. I also think it is not LLM and generative AI based, but yes, I think we can do some R&D and get back to you. Let's go to the next question. It's more towards higher education decision makers now. This question has come to us from the audience too. So with the advent of generative AI, what are the new concerns of higher education decision makers? Should there be any new policies that need to be introduced institutionally or worldwide? So yes, Roger, would you like to go first this time?
Yeah, well, I'm recently retired from UK academia. I'm still working abroad, but in a very different capacity. So so this is fairly new, but but I know from my colleagues and from reading the Times Higher that there's a huge amount of concern about this. And of course, it's polarized into the camp of people who say, this is terrible. We must stop students from using this. And at the other end, well, we've got to adapt to it. I'm very much at the other end because we can't stop people using this. So we need to find a way of producing policies and practices which, students will be far more adept at using this than any of their lecturers because they're younger and they're in that generation. They'll learn much quickly. So they've got to teach us about it, and we've got to learn the limits. And I know it's a more mundane example, but people are already using Grammarly, and that is an AI, very low level sort of AI, but it is AI, and we actually encourage people to use that. We say to our international students all the time, run it through Grammarly, or run it through a web-based readability, which will give you sentence structure, advice and things like that. So we already do this. And I think, I'm rambling a bit, but I think the concerns are definitely there. The concerns are there that people might cheat in examinations and essays and things like that. And it might push people back to more face-to-face examinations. They might have to adopt the assessment techniques so that people have the opportunity to run away doing everything by AI. They will have to sit in front of an invigilator and do an examination. But But just one more point. Exactly the same arguments existed for a while around Wikipedia. Students, I know it's not AI, but students mustn't use Wikipedia. It's terrible. Well, students use it all the time now, and so do academics, because academics contribute towards it. We help to make those sites better, and we point people towards the sites that we use. So I think the argument will go around for a while, and then it'll settle down.
Yes. Yes. So I think the main difference here is like tools like Trinka and Grammarly, they operate within limits. And something like GPT and what we're discussing right now, because it's open AI, it seems limitless and hence boundless and, ruleless for that matter. So that kind of scares me personally. So Trinka, would you like to take this opportunity to quickly explain how Trinka works from an AI point of view, because it is after all AI too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think what Roger said is very important, because AI tools were always there.
Correct.
All right, and but the extent to which they were involved or they had an impact on the writing, anyone's writing, was I would say average. All right, it was more of checking spellings, or maybe give a better word choice, change the tone. That's more of a minimal involvement in the text. But with ChatGPT and the LLMs, right, it's a whole new game. All right, I don't need to think of writing. When I'm writing, I think and I write, right? But here I've outsourced my thinking, and this is one perspective. Okay, I don't say that I subscribe to it, right? But I've outsourced my thinking, and now let me polish the writing that I get from ChatGPT, the starting point. It's a prompt. In education, we use prompts to get our students to elicit information, right? So we get that output, and then we are modifying that text that will suit our purposes, right? So I think that is where the fear lies, I'd say, or rather that unease lies with using such tools, and you have this polarization that is happening.
Yes.
Among the teaching community, whether to use or not to use.
Correct.
Right. But bottom line is the cat's out of the bag, right? You cannot put back in. Okay? So now
the cat's giving kittens now, Trinka.
Yeah.
Multiple kittens. Yeah. It's not only out of the bag. Yeah.
So I think it's we need to adapt.
Correct.
To
adapt and responsibly
teach our
so.
students and writers on how to use such tools wisely.
Right.
Yeah. And also understand the ethics around it.
Yes,
I think
completely.
That's something that is very needed in the times today.
Yes, exactly. So we have a related question. I think maybe this is for Roger or Chavi. How to identify? Is there a way to identify if students are using AI for writing? That's a question by an audience member. Is there a definition?
Yeah, you're cutting out a bit there, Anupama, but I think I got the gist of the question. I think that there are tools. Is it? I think I've highlighted something somewhere in something that I wrote about GPT-0, but I don't know how it works. That's the only tool that I know of that's supposed to detect this kind of writing, but it does suffer from the problems that I noticed that people have mentioned in the chat, actually, about word bursting and hallucinations and all the rest of it. It doesn't pick these things up, and it's not good at picking up ambiguities and things like that. Sorry, the ChatGPT isn't good at writing those things, and it does pick up. It does focus on one or two of these things like word bursting and some other phrases, ambiguity or whatever in phrases. But it depends on those. I just don't know how good it is. I don't think it's. According to my colleagues in Slovenia, it's not very good. It detects at a very high. The bar set quite high for these things. It doesn't detect very minute details that might be detected. So yeah.
Fair enough. So just a quick point, and then Chavi, maybe you can go on. So I think in a just a recent workshop that I had with one of the Indonesian universities, and this question I got asked, instead of me, the principal of the university, he answered that if things look too good to be true, on writing, we are going to call that student and ask them to answer questions. One is that. So there would be like a Viva format for students who are seemingly passing with flying colors, on the written text. So that is one way they are going to weed out use of AI, because I think they agree that there is no perfect AI tool to detect AI writing yet. And second, they are going to implement handwriting for a part of their testing. So also from a PhD dissertation point of view, they're going to actually evaluate physical writing instead of using a laptop or electronic writing. So they might use that for a portion of their test, just to evaluate whether the student is actually great at science communication or not. And this is going to be only they're going to be used that. So that's one thing that they're going to do, and that's going to be very critical. Yes, Chavi, what do you think?
Yeah, so I missed the last part. I think your voice was cutting off, but I completely agree with Roger and you that currently there are no good tools to completely identify text generated by these large language models. But having said that, each field is advancing. So there should be better tools coming up. And going back to what Roger was saying, the bursting problem or the repetitive words or the repetitive phrases.
Correct.
That is very easy to catch using these tools. But I sort of want to emphasize just a little bit more on human intervention again, because as an educator, Roger, right, when you see the papers that are coming from your students, you're easily able to identify if they had lifted sections from a text, because that's not their natural writing style, or they may not be aware of that context coming based on their age, for example, right? So I think their lack of understanding of a particular subject may be an indication of whether or not they wrote it. If a particular research paper required citing some of these sources, then that would be a very good way. And one of the educators I had a conversation with recently said he is able to, pick all the papers that his students are writing using LLM models, because, their citations are completely off. So that is a good way of finding things.
Yes.
But I do have a concern here, because I wonder about if we are creating a divide here, right, in different geographies, for example. So we talked about tools like Grammarly, and there's certain other similar tools that will help people who are not native English language speakers, right? We may have a bunch of those in our audience here. So if, like, I grew up in India and I came to US and I struggled with the accent, I struggled with, how to approach writing, because the writing style that I was taught in India was British style, and we have a different approach of writing things compared to here in the US. So if I were to use any of these tools, the text that would get generated would have those aspects of bursting in there. So if someone had to run the text that maybe I had my own ideas, but I used the tool to synthesize something, then it may be flagged as being generated using a large language model, which may not be correct completely. So even if those were my ideas. So I think folks who do not have skills in a particular language, and you're asking them to generate the product in that language, may be at a disadvantage, because their one of my concerns.
Okay, thanks for sharing that, Chavi. I think in the next section, when we talk about plagiarism a little bit more, we can still, we can further discuss what are the implications of copy pasting text from ChatGPT and whether that gets flagged as plagiarized text also, in addition to it being an LLM text. But since we're talking about human writing, let's go to the next question. I can't see the next question on the screen. Can the others see the next question? Okay, all right. So I'll just announce it. So basically the next question is, what are the possibilities of making, what are the possibilities of AI making writers defunct? So what is going to be the role of the writer, right, in this world of AI? So Trinka, would you like to take a swipe at this?
Yeah. Yes, I'd like to take a swipe.
Yes.
I think all the generative AI tools, they make for excellent assistants. It
Yes,
cannot
agreed.
replace a person creating any piece of work, be it creative writing, art, or writing an analytical or research paper. Right? As an assistant to help make the process easier so that you can focus on the difficult parts. I think that it's a great tool. Right? It also depends on what kind of the kind of writing and at what stage of the writing process a person is in. So at what point do you want to use such a tool? Right. So for example, if someone's writing a standard news clip on an incident, all right, it's more of a template, the who, what, when, where. Yeah. So that's kind of a formulaic, quick news article. Right. Or even a short piece on a very general topic, an explanatory topic. Or they would like to customize it for a certain reader profile, right? So that's where generative AI can do things quickly. And it can give you options you can choose. And as you said, we can change the prompts to get the desired output and then publish it. Right. All right. So if you or you may want to do a quick check on a final copy before sending it to your manager or to the publication, it's helpful there too. Okay? In terms of fiction writing, I think AI generated stories and novels could be a new genre by itself, which would make for interesting reading. So, but again, that will not make writers redundant. Writing is not for just producing books. Yes. You know? It's about understanding the world. Yes. Telling the stories of different people. Yeah. Telling your story. Right. So it might diversify the genres, but it will not make writers defunct. Okay. So my take on this is, say one, you have to, I think, disclose that you use AI tools for any responsible publishing to happen. And from a consumer point of view, why would you pay for something that is just AI generated? Say, if you're talking about books that is generated by AI, I think there would be a lot of shift in the economics overall from the produced, output produced from AI. So that is one thing I think overall globally, it could be a problem. It could be a shift in dynamics completely. And second, I think non-writers cannot produce good output on AI. Writers actually know what to look out for. They have that creative instinct. They have a brief in mind when they want to generate an output. So AI can assist them being better writers. But non-writers would generally struggle and probably put in double the time generating an output from ChatGPT or any other AI tool and trying to make it look presentable as well as accurate. So this is something we've experienced with researchers who are, early stage career as well as experienced researchers. So early stage career researchers, they would generally go to something like this if they are English as a second language, like Chavi mentioned, right? If they're ESL. But that is probably the responsibility of the language centers of the universities that they are studying in, to make them feel comfortable in the language that is English and to make them better at science communication and scholarly communication, rather than take the shortcut or the shorthand, because I'm not sure if they would ever get better at writing. They'll probably get better at generating faster outputs, but without much sense, in terms of learning. So that is something we should all remember. So with this, let's go to the... Yes, Chavi.
Sorry.
Sure.
I was just going to add a quick note, going back to what you said, and Trinka, I think it might make the bad writers defunct for sure, because they will be able to use the AI. And maybe. I don't know how everyone else feels, but I think from last November, there has been just a flood of information on ChatGPT and all other large language models. So the amount of information that we have up for consumption is so much that I think people are going to become picky about what information they care about. How much time and bandwidth they have to consume that information. So maybe there will be more awareness about reading the information that may have come from genuine sources, good writers, creative thinkers. Correct. So maybe that'll elevate the impact of these writers and authors in the long run.
Yes, I think they may have to get more creative, if anything. So thanks for that note, Chavi. Let's go to the next section. So the next session is about ethics and research integrity concerns. We will address a lot more questions under this section because we are all for responsible AI, and this is something we want to pass on to the audience. So AI-generated text, as we all know now, comes with severe concerns such as transparency, accountability, biased results, privacy, to name a few. These limitations are being widely discussed, but the popularity of AI tools is still rising across academics. So we'll discuss the first two questions. If the second question can also come on the screen, we'll discuss them in totality. So let's discuss bias in detail because Roger already touched upon that in the first segment. And let's also discuss hallucination and regurgitation. So Roger, would you like to go first? Would you like to explain to the audience what exactly is bias from AI? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, I'm glad you asked me that question because I don't know how to address the second one.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's two types of bias that I can think of and that I've seen in ChatGPT. One is it's biased in favor of what's already been written about or is commonly and easily available on the internet. So, for example, it's very easy to find something out, for example, about me, because I've got a Wikipedia page, and it just finds that and basically regurgitates that, addressing the second point. So, but there are other, I ask it about other colleagues or just out of interest, and they're not there. So there's a bias in that sense. There's also been, as I said, the only other bias that I know about is that it's biased slightly towards a particular way of thinking, perhaps a modern woke way of thinking. Some people may think that's good, some people don't, but it's a fact that it is, and it will sometimes not give you information on certain topics because it considers them sensitive. And I've seen people writing about this, particularly journalists asking about certain issues and saying we don't do that. We don't. ChatGPT sort of becomes a person then and says, I do not like to speak about issues like that and things like that. But so there are areas where it doesn't sort of delve. And I'm also guessing that there's a sort of like a publication bias in it, not different from the one that I mentioned originally, but I'm guessing that topics that are published about a lot are much more found by it. So you might become, you might ask a question about a treatment, say a COVID treatment or whatever, and you'll pick up all the, you'll just learn about what's been published about most, I think, rather than what maybe actually works. Something new. So all I'm saying is that there's those biases present. They can only be overcome by the person using it, having some sort of expertise themselves and being able to fish that out and sort out those details. But that's really all I know about the bias in it.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Roger. Do we have Apurva on the panel still? Yes. Apurva, would you like to quickly tell the audience about hallucination and regurgitation and how it affects research writing?
Yeah, sure. I can do that. Whenever we talk about hallucination, it's primarily about the model tends to generate plausible results, but sometimes, it is incorrect. So that's what hallucination is. And about the regurgitation is something like it's something that repeats. This we don't observe right now, but like before ChatGPT or like at the time of GPT-3, model tend to repeat itself. And that tends to give incorrect results at the end of the day. So, but now with latest models with reinforcement technique and other generation techniques, these aspects have been reduced. In fact, hallucination it's a key issue which we face in ChatGPT. But I think with more amount of data and more reinforcement techniques applied on these models, this can be removed from the
Okay,
picture.
thanks, Apurva. So basically, what from an application point of view, what I have seen is generally regurgitation still exists. It is not completely out of the picture. It has just become better, say from a 3.0 to 3.5 to 4 right now. So GPT-4 that we have right now. But it still regurgitates a lot of existing information and it represents in a way that looks beautiful to me, but it's actually completely inaccurate. Hallucination also results in inaccurate results and outputs. So these two terms, although very technical from an AI perspective, the outcome that researchers should expect is inaccurate output from ChatGPT or any other generative AI tool that we're talking about. We have a related question from an audience member that I'd like to take. The audience member asks, is it ethically wrong if we copy, No, sorry. The audience member asks, do you know if there are already some tools that will automatically check and evaluate for ethics, bias, and accuracy? Roger, would you like to take this question? Are you aware of any tools?
Well, I'm aware of tools that will check for similarity to other sources. We use them all the time within the publishing industry. The major publishers, Wiley and Elsevier, certainly use a tool, and I've actually forgotten what Authenticate. Sorry, but that's only checking for similarity.
Plagiarism. Yeah,
plagiarism. Well, I mean, I prefer to. I know that plagiarism, but I prefer to say similarity, because plagiarism is a sort of judgment on that similarity. But that's all I know about. Other than that, what you'd be doing is superimposing one set of AI on another set of AI to check if it's accurate and whatever. So I don't know. I strongly suspect there's no way that you can do that other than by the human element. You know that.
Yes, correct. Chavi, Trinka, do you know of any tools? Would you like to add here?
No, we use Authenticate as well, and I completely agree with Roger. And what this attendees suggesting would be a magic wand. Wouldn't that be great? The regulation, unfortunately, has been so far behind. I don't think we are anywhere close to checking ethically if these tools were used, or if they were used ethically.
Yes, exactly.
That would be
yeah.
That's true. It cannot go deep. In fact, what can be found are the surface level words, you can say. All right. So, for example, you can only say whether a paper has the necessary ethical compliances because there is a statement in the paper. But regarding the study, the ethics behind the study, that cannot be gauged just from the paper itself. And it will be really a miracle if we can do that.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you for discussing these questions. Let's go to the next question. What is responsible AI? I think this is very close to Chavi's heart. I'll let her go first. So what is responsible AI in primarily research?
It is close to my heart, and I don't want to keep going on, but I want to say, like, responsible AI changes in the context of, the model that we are discussing and the field or the domain that we are talking about. So when we are talking about academic or scholarly publishing, I think everything that we publish is based on accountability. All the authors read and sign off the disclosures that they have. They stand behind the manuscript, they have read it, and they approve it in the final format, for example. So when we are using large language models, that accountability sort of goes away, because a machine or an algorithm or an AI tool cannot be accountable. Then I've talked about the dissemination of misinformation and disinformation. So to me, trustworthiness is very important, and having responsible AI in the scholarly publishing domain would have to be on the foundation of trustworthiness, because the information that you're disseminating is gonna decide what people think about that study. It's gonna guide them to think about the next steps about how they want to move the field forward. Another thing that I want to talk about is trust. I did say trustworthiness. The other thing I want to talk about is explainability, right? So the whole foundation of research is what literature is out there, what is the evidence that supports what you're presenting or your hypothesis, or what may be in controversy to what you're proposing, and why that may be controversial. Because there's so many treatments that come in one individual, the treatment may be controversial, in the other individual, it may have benefits, but you have to discuss in the context of the individuals, in the context of the domain, in the context of the field. So if we do not stand behind the citations, for example, or explain the sources, why the model generated a particular output, give us at least maybe some sort of a quantitative analysis, for 90% of the time, this statement would hold, because so many articles suggest this to be the case. And lastly, I think responsible AI would be fairness in academic publishing, which I think may be a key issue going forward. So we don't see that yet, but all these large language models are free to access right now. And, we all have been playing with those. And it has been made very evident by the generators of these large language models that they will be monetizing these in the long run. So I know Enago supports people from Latin America and some of the other geographies. And in resource limiting settings, people may not have the resources to use these models. So are they going to be behind in the race in scholarly publishing going forward? Are we extending the divide in publishing and academic publishing that already existed? Are we going to exacerbate that? So to me, responsible AI would be approaching these tools with fairness in mind. I think I'm going to pause there.
No, that's a very interesting insight. And thanks for sharing your inputs, Chavi. Roger and Trinka, would you like to add to what Chavi said?
Yes, I think Chavi's last point was very good about equity and fairness.
Exactly. Yes.
You know, we can't. We those of us who can afford it, or if it's affordable by some countries, shouldn't be sitting back complacently. I can imagine. I may be imagining beyond this particular webinar, but I can imagine companies producing, you know, integrated AI tools that do all sorts of things as a platform that could be sold to universities who are probably more able to afford these things than individuals under license, a little bit like statistical packages and things like that. That might be one way ahead, but that isn't answering the question about responsible AI. I think responsible AI or the responsible use of AI will all hinge around transparency, you know, and I think that sort of summarizes in a way what Chavi was saying. People need to be learning to declare that they've used it, and how we declare it, we as publishers must, or editors must, give them the facility to do that. And, you know, because as I keep saying, it's not going to go away. It's here, so we do need to learn how to accommodate it.
Exactly. I think from a responsible AI point of view, it's not just the responsibility of researchers. It's also the responsibility of all the stakeholders that are involved in the science spectrum, because it should absolutely not lead to downfall of science, you know, through false results, false reporting, false research, incorrect applications of science, or, you know, false dissemination of results, even bias towards positive results compared to negative results if someone's finding a gap in the literature. So it should definitely not lead to downfall of science, and that responsibility lies with everyone, say starting with policymakers and decision makers, who should absolutely have regulations and guidelines for responsible use of AI. Similarly, the LLMs and say the organizations supporting initiatives like OpenAI should also be responsible towards AI with respect to copyright, with respect to paywalls, and, you know, everything that currently does not exist. So yeah, that is my take on responsible AI. Trinka, would you like to add anything to this?
Yeah, so the explainable AI aspect that Chavi touched upon, right? So we can see this currently happening where Sam Altman himself is asking the government, regulate my AI, regulate it. All right. And governments are seriously looking into regulations. They want to make their own, each country or each region wants to make its own LLM, you know, a wide and a really omnipresent LLM. So we can see that happening already. Everything's in flux right now. So we'll need to wait and see that what, because the regulations also are important for responsible AI, how organizations use it, how groups use it. How the government itself uses it. And so we'll need to wait and watch what kind of regulations. That will be really, really interesting. I think Chavi will be very busy too there with this.
Yes. All right. So we'll not touch upon the next question in detail, but we've basically the next question is, how reliable are the outcomes of ChatGPT and AI tools? I think we've already discussed in detail that they're not very reliable. They cannot escape the human evaluation and the value add that a human can bring in from expertise and, you know, just from an eye for detail. So we'll not discuss this question in detail. Let's go to the next slide and talk about publishers. So how are publishers addressing these alarming concerns now that we have definitely, you know, agreed that there are alarming concerns with unrestricted use and unregulated use and lack of guidelines? So how are they addressing these alarming concerns? Are there any specific ways by which journals are currently detecting the use of AI tools in areas that they are not supposed to be used? So I'd like Roger to go first on this question.
Okay, I'm glad. I don't know if I'm glad you asked me. To be absolutely frank, no. I know of nothing. I knew of nothing within Wiley, which I just finished with recently, and I'm working within Elsevier, which is one of the biggest academic publishers in the area, and I know of absolutely no. I know they're concerned about it, but I don't know of anything that we're doing. The only thing that we've done is produce guidelines, which I know are coming up later, about attribution of authorship. That's it. but that doesn't address the issue of the use of AI. So no, I think publishers are busy catching up with this at the moment. And I think a lot of the standard tools that are used for plagiarism or similarity, and also image manipulation, which I know there are tools for that. That's not an issue in my area of nursing. It is in other areas. I know that there are ways of addressing that, but they've existed already. They're not to do with AI. They just pre-exist. So I know of nothing specific that's happening. And if I'm remiss in that, I'm sorry. I just don't know of anything. But I'm sure come back in 12 months time and we could talk about this for an hour probably. I'm sure they'll have caught up by that time.
Yes, but it is interesting to know that publishers like Elsevier also are not in a position to do something at the moment. Chavi, would you like to go on this question? Take a go.
I completely agree with Roger. Currently there are no published or known resources yet from the publishers.
All right. So what I know from the publisher's point of view is I think we've just about established an STM group, of around 10 to 12 publishers who are actively working on this problem. They were already working on paper mills, basically papers that are generated by paper mills, but that has a very different algorithm from them, detecting papers generated from paper mills. But currently, I think they have, because they know that this is rampant, they are on a watch out for papers that are generated by AI. They've given strict instructions to the editorial boards and peer reviewers to flag any and everything that relates to AI. So that is what they have done so far, but it is of course human effort. What could happen in the hindsight in all of this is, I hope the number of peer reviewers doesn't go down, because then they would have to detect the science, they would have to detect the AI, they would have to detect the writing. So the responsibility just becomes too much from a peer reviewer point of view. And, instead of the studies getting published more often, we may just see the opposite, which is probably bad for any researcher. So this is just one of the long-term disadvantages that I can foresee from a publisher point of view. But yeah, I think technology can catch up, and there will be some tools that would definitely detect AI generated text. The next question is related to copyright, because it's also a very important issue here. What is the panel's view on the issue of copyright with regards to LLMs, drawing on the corpus of available data, publication of regenerated text by users? So what is your opinion? Chavi, we'll go with you first.
Okay, sounds good. So I sort of want to raise the basic question, if you had taken information from another published source and just put it in your publication, would you call it plagiarism? And if so, then the same principles apply. So this is another model that is summarizing or synthesizing material. And if you copy paste that and claim it as your own, then that is plagiarism in my, at least by my definition.
Definitely. Roger, would you agree or disagree?
Well, yes, I mean, if there's no doubt about what plagiarism, it's relatively easy to define. It's not always easy to detect, but if somebody just lifts something from somewhere else, but copyright extends way beyond that. I mean, it can extend to ideas as well, and
yes,
copyright is actually very difficult to define because every country's got different copyright laws, and if I break copyright against someone within the UK, I can be sure I'll be chased. But if I steal something from another country, it can be very difficult, to do anything. My employer might do something about it if I'm caught doing it, but it's very difficult. So copyright's a very complicated legal area, and I certainly wouldn't like to give any, say too much about it. But I think if it comes down to plagiarism, that's an intellectual or an academic issue, which separate, and we can deal with that. But I just want to say one more thing but the increasing move towards open science and the use of Creative Commons licenses, which I think, turn the clock forward, 5 years or 10 years, everything will be published under CCLs. I can't imagine anything that's not copyrightable within science in that sense. I think everything will be open access, open science, and provided the Creative Commons licenses are used properly and acknowledged, I think this problem of information, of copyright about information, and ideas might just go away, to be honest.
That's an interesting aspect. So I think from a copyright point of view, what is currently troubling, and it may get better with time, I'm not sure, but what is currently troubling is that sources of data are taken without the licenses being attributed to, or without the information being asked for formally, right? So the process is completely uneven and not controlled again. So generally speaking, I think there are lawsuits from different companies. I think some tech companies have also, I think, generated some losses because the coders have inserted some information on ChatGPT, and that has been available for others. So the model itself does not take any responsibility for copyright, because what you enter in it is your responsibility. But if you share this with somebody else, and if that gets plagiarized, not only in terms of text, but also ideas, idea plagiarism is also a concept in research. It can be fairly, loss-making and dangerous overall. So something that we all have to consider. Let's move on to the next question. So yes, that's why we were sort of building up to this question. So what are the current risks of inserting unpublished original work as prompts or as data sets inside ChatGPT? Trinka, would you like to go first on this? What are the current risks that a researcher can incur?
Well, I think the security would be one of the main issues. The data is out there. Now, we are not sure how OpenAI or BERT or all the large language models use this data. So the idea is that every model needs to improve itself. That it's not going to stagnate. All right. If OpenAI says that we have data till September 2021, all right, it was not going to stay that way. Right. So this can become public information in another iteration. So I think from your work, which confidential work, which you would not want to share with anyone, that becoming indirectly public would happen. That's one of the biggest risks.
Definitely. Chavi and Roger, what are your takes on this question? Because this is extremely important from the point of view of using it to generate ideas, or say possibly using it for editing, which I personally don't endorse for unpublished work. But what are your thoughts? I'd like to hear.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Anupma and Trinka. You were absolutely right about it becoming, the ideas getting regurgitated and, spitting out in a different format. So most of the people go here to scientific meetings, and the way we have started presenting posters has changed drastically. So I want to sort of use that context in explaining what can happen. Right. So the way we used to present our posters, we would present all the data we had to date. At least when I was training as a grad student, I did that. So I could engage the community to see if the problem that I was seeking had merit. What were the various approaches of, getting to that hypothesis? What is it that I'm missing, and what could be the possible outcomes, right? But over the course of time, because people will steal ideas, they will steal data, and if they have more resources than you, may be able to publish your ideas faster, putting you behind in your own game. So people started only publishing or presenting in poster the amount of data that was either published previously without sharing any of the hypotheses of what they were going forward with. So it sort of goes back to the same approach. If you have made considerable or significant amount of progress in a project and you insert that unpublished work to generate some context using these large language models, that data is going to be captured by the model. So far, OpenAI and other places don't talk about using this data to be used in other users, queries, but at least in your chat history, all your queries, all that data stays. And OpenAI and all other these large language models stand behind that. So the data is being captured. It only takes a tweak at the back end to integrate the data, to retrain the machine, and to use that for reinforcement learning. So your data, unpublished data, is not going to be safe. Your unpublished ideas are not going to be safe, but they would be available for public consumption. So you have to keep that in mind before inserting your unpublished original work in any of the large language models.
Thanks, Chavi. I think I completely agree. I mean, I don't think I disagree at all. And that is why unpublished work, currently, it is at risk if you do tend to enter that into ChatGPT. Roger, would you like to add anything?
No, nothing to that. That was comprehensive.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next question because it's about authorship. Can we go to the question after that too? So basically, we'd like to discuss AI tools not meeting authorship criteria, right? We'd like our audience to know why was this rule introduced, by journals that AI tools cannot be authors. Can we go to the second question also? And what are some of the guidelines that publishers are currently, basically they've informed the researchers that they have to mandatorily do. In the absence of this, what could be the results? What could be the outcomes? So Roger, you wanted to say something about this.
Yes, I definitely do. Being someone as an editor who's published a paper with ChatGPT, acknowledged as an author in error, it was done as a joke by not as a joke, but in humor by the person writing the editorial, and I missed it. So this caused a huge furor, and it went international. It went absolutely viral. So I became very aware then that we don't, and the reason that we don't do this, and I knew that already, but we just missed it, is that they're not accountable under the ICMJE or COPE guidance. I mean, you've got to be accountable for anything that is in the paper and any problems that arise afterwards. So it's quite simply a matter of accountability for the content. And I suppose the second point is where I've seen this done, and we've had a lot of papers now, we've had a rash of papers and editorials using AI as examples, and just in the acknowledgement section at the end to say that part of this paper was generated using ChatGPT, but it was, subsequently edited or whatever. So I think the provision is already there for this kind of thing.
Okay, but do such papers tend to get rejected more, or do they tend to get?
Yeah, well, in my experience, we haven't had any scientific papers yet. It's always been discussion or editorial type papers. There was quite an exchange of ideas about this around the time. So I haven't had any experience of original papers yet using AI. I mean, let me just make it clear. I've got no idea. I may have had papers using AI. We're not declare this. And I think that every editor in the world has to realize that they may already have published papers using AI without any disclosure. I think that's eminently possible.
Yes, I think what's going to happen is once we have an AI detection tool, all publishers are going to run all papers through these tools and weed out some papers. And I hope the number is not high, but I'm being optimistic. All right. Chavi, would you like to add to this? Do you have any perspective?
I completely agree with what Roger said. I don't know if we'll have the bandwidth of going back and, reviewing all the articles, but it would be lovely to do that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that can itself be a research area or something like that. But yeah, I mean, it could be interesting. See, Roger's giving me 2 thumbs up. All right. I think we can go to the next. Yes, we have a poll now for the audience. We've discussed so many topics about using AI for research writing and where it's safe and where it's not. So I'd like to know from the audience, what measures do you think should be implemented to mitigate potential ethical and research integrity risks when using AI tools like ChatGPT? First option is robust ethical guidelines and policies. Second option is regular auditing and evaluation. Third option is increased transparency and disclosure. And the fourth option is ethical training and awareness programs. So I'll just give a couple of minutes to the audience members. And like before, any predictions? Roger, Chavi, Trinka, any predictions from this poll?
I was speaking with I was muted. I think the first one is the one that's 1 and 4.
I agree with Roger, 1 and 4. I would love to see these processes being audited over times, and that's something I advocate for exclusively or excessively, but that might be a long way to come.
I was going for auditing the algorithms for bias and fairness.
Okay, all right. So that's what the panelists are going for. Let's see what the audience have gone for. Can we close the poll and see the results? Okay. All right. We have 187 votes and the majority voting is for ethical training and awareness programs. Great. All right. I think everyone is interested now. I mean, the objective of the webinar was ethics, use of ethics and responsible AI. So I'm glad this is the topmost option, and then followed by the guidelines. Regular auditing and evaluation of AI algorithms somehow has the least interest area here. So yeah, we can close the poll here, but it was good to see the results. In the interest of time, because I think we have a lot many more questions, we may skip a few questions and we may take these in the next webinar. So we have the next section for AI tools and decision making. Can we go to the next slide and populate all the questions? Yes. So from this, basically, I think the only question that we might be interested in knowing is, what is your take on an automated or a semi-automated peer review system? This is something we have not discussed at all. So a quick take from the panelists on this question. Chavi, would you like to go first?
So we have, for the last several years, we've been sort of semi-automating our peer review system anyway, but that has been not large language model space, but robotic process automation, where we're trying to decrease the burden on the editorial staff. So things that can be automated, the mundane, like sending invites to reviewers, sending them, emails for follow-up and reminding them their reviews are due. So things like that are easy to be automated, and that will increase the human efficiency, so the humans can actually focus on more creative work. And if you talk about just the peer review in itself from the perspective of AI reviewing the articles, I would be gravely against that.
Okay.
Just given the limited bandwidth of the algorithms in the current form, to add something meaningful to what they're going to give to the authors. As a reviewer, I may share my own perspective to let them know, from our experience, we've seen this thing. Perhaps you should do such and such to elevate the quality and impact of your article, which the AI is going to fail to do. So from the perspective of providing reviews, definitely not.
Okay, thanks, Chavi. Roger, would you agree or disagree?
Yeah, I would agree entirely. We've got all those sort of robotic systems. I didn't know what they were called, but they do all. We've got a system that does all the things that Chavi said.
Right.
Yeah, I would be concerned about automating them. I mean, I know you don't mean that, but we'd still have to meet the, for those of us with impact factors, we'd still have to meet the Clarivate requirements of having 2 reviewers. So you can't get away from having the human beings. There's nothing to stop them, of course, using AI, but we'd have to detect that. But the problem is that there's an article just out in the Lancet called "The Dangers of Using Large Language Models for Peer Review." It's a correspondence, is 1 page, and it says it here. It says the real risk of using large language models to do reviews is it produces something that looks like a review because it summarizes the paper very nicely, but doesn't say anything useful or critical about it. So people might think, oh, that looks good, and just pass it on as a review, but actually it doesn't help the authors. It doesn't help the editors.
Okay, all right. So I think I agree with both of you. It's just that I want to repeat what we just discussed. AI should not result in the downfall of science. And currently, peer review system is probably the only gatekeeper for us in terms of science regulation. So that is something I think it cannot surpass. So thanks for that. Let's go to the next section. So we quickly discussed the editing bit, human editing versus ChatGPT editing. Let's show both questions on this slide. So I'd like to address this question to Trinka. From a limitation point of view and implications of editing. So what are the limitations of GPT and similar AI tools as editors, and as an expert in AI, as well as being a past editor? What do you recommend in terms of professional assistance use for editing? Trinka?
Yeah. So in one of the past questions, we talked about a generative AI. A low risk one would be polishing the final draft of your text before you send it for publication or to a higher up, right? So that will help. It will help polishing the writing, like enhance the grammar, the sentence structure, word choice. But when it comes to facts, the main problem that we focused on earlier, that still is glaring. Right. So when it comes to facts, to the flow and arrangement of ideas, so how meaning is delivered, its capabilities are limited. So it's best that a human writer and editor concentrate on these aspects of writing while outsourcing the mechanical aspects to a tool. Right now, also I'd say that use AI tools to draft your paper and leave it to the domain-based human editors to craft it to its best quality possible. Because research should be solid, it should be clear, it should read well, and it should be well presented. So in all these aspects, the and a human editor collaborates with the author. They don't work in isolation.
Yes,
right? A human being
exactly.
collaborates with the author to get the best version of the paper out for submission. Right. So I think even with AI becoming more capable, AI evolves, so it'll become more and more capable. But even with this, it becoming more proficient, I think human guidance, collaboration, and validation are extremely important, and it will be a highly valued point of drafting or submissions.
Yes, and let's not forget about submitting unpublished work on AI tools like ChatGPT. So even if you're using those for polishing, which I'm sure some of you are already using, but there is a risk, there's an associated risk, some of which you may not even come to know in the short term, and it may just basically become evident to you after some time, and by which time it may not be retrievable. So that is something you will have to evaluate for yourself. Yes, Roger and Chavi, would you like to comment on it as, say, publishers and journal editors?
Yes, well, I think Trinka said everything about the limitations. I think on the second point of using professional assistance for editing, I find it very difficult to know what to say, because professional assistance is very expensive. And what you find is, I mean, I don't want to classify the world into English-speaking rich and non-English-speaking poor or anything like that, but I know from the spread of papers we get in my journal, which is now Chinese-based, but it's an English-speaking journal, Chinese managed. It's America, Australia, the UK. It's the English-speaking Western countries that produce most of the papers. They're the people who could probably afford assistance with editing, but don't need it. And the parts of the world which don't publish in English, and where the first language is not English, probably can't afford it because it's horrendously expensive. So there's a matter of equity there. So I don't know what the answer is to that question, but I just think that I don't know what the answer is. I hate to recommend things that people can't afford, basically.
No, agreed completely. I think what we also strive to do is, from the point of view of open access publishing and from the point of view of funding, I think all of us can agree that researchers should be well funded by institutions, by basically funders, or by corporates, for advancing science, so that they can avail of services like this, and they have a choice of services, so they don't really need to opt for the most expensive one. And I think with experience, every author gets better at writing. Yes, even an ESL author, I mean, that is, so I've been editing for the last 12 to 15 years, and I have seen repeat authors coming with even better and better versions of writing. And that is completely generated by them. They're probably getting feedback from the editors, becoming better at their writing, and then, so that's probably what I would like to say. Chavi, would you also want to add?
So I think Roger and Trinka and yourself have covered quite a bit, but I would say I would be all for folks using responsible AI tools to augment their skills as they would use a professional for assisting them in editing.
All right. Okay. I think we can agree on that. And let's go to the next slide, which has the poll for the audience, because we'd like to know what the audience has already used. So when it comes to polishing research papers for your target publications, which editing approach have you used? Human editing by experts, peers, or professionals? AI editing based on patterns and conventions? You've used both, or you've used neither. So these are your options. I think we can give the audience a few seconds and we can look at what the results are. What does the panel think in this case? Fairly simple, maybe. No surprises.
No, I think the first one, because AI is fairly new.
Fair enough. Okay.
It would be interesting to see.
Yes.
No, go ahead.
I think it would be spread across. I'm sorry, Chavi.
Okay. All right.
I think
Trinka thinks.
across, I think.
Yeah, Trinka's being smart because she looked at the previous
you already
polls.
had AI tools from before, but they, as I said, they were low scale.
Right. Chavi? You were saying something?
I think it's going to be human editing, but I was saying it would be interesting to see if folks found one better than the other, those who use both.
Fair enough. All right, we can close the poll and see what the audience has polled. Let's see the results. Okay. All right. They have used, majority of them have used human editing. And this time 200 people have voted. So yeah, that's a fairly good representation of what we thought. And also 26% have used both. So that is something. So I hope you folks, have also listened to our talks about using unpublished research. So yes, and a fair bit have also not used either. So yes, very few have used AI editing. It is encouraging right now from the point of view of using AI for unpublished work and unregulated work. But yes, I mean, this is ChatGPT that we're talking about, not every AI tool, right? There are other AI tools that you can use for writing assistance. We have discussed a few tool names in this webinar too. All right, I think that's the end of the questions. So thank you so much to the panel. But for the audience, I have a few slides. Can we go to the next slide? As promised. Yes, so this is, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, this is a quick comparison that we have generated for the audience for a quick consumption. We will also share this after the webinar. So these are the primary, ticks and crosses across human editor and ChatGPT. We have done this exercise over several papers, published papers, open access papers. So no misuse of AI here. So this is what we found. As you see it, ChatGPT does not provide explanatory comments, does not provide tips, does not identify content gaps, but it does fix punctuation, it does fix style, it does fix grammar, and it works best on already existing information. So this is a summary. Let's go to the next slide. Yes, so basically this is an example that I thought I'd share with everyone. So this is a sample of an original text that a researcher has written. The amount of protein in the diet is important in all patients with chronic kidney disease. It has been shown that CKD low protein diet, including DNP, has been shown to slow the progression to ESRD. So we can determine that the writing is not perfect, but the intent is there. The intent is clear. Let's see what ChatGPT has done. For those familiar with this field, you will immediately notice that ChatGPT has completely misconstrued the meaning here overall, and it has considered DNP as an essential amino acid and not as a part of CKD. So if you notice the difference between the ChatGPT and the human editor text, this is the main meaning change that was introduced by ChatGPT. Let's go to the next animation that has the explanation. So ChatGPT overall misinterpreted DNP to be an amino acid instead of the diabetic nephropathy it is, and it introduced a critical meaning change in the sentence. In contrast, the human editor ensured the current usage of discipline-specific term. So overall, AI tools are not really conversant with SME, the subject matter expertise that is required to edit such scientific text. And this was important for us to share with the audience, considering the topic that we're discussing today. Let's go to the next example. This is from economics. This is the original text. Let's go to the next slide. And let's look at the edits by ChatGPT versus human. Can we go to the previous slide? Yes. Okay, let's look at the edits made by ChatGPT versus a human editor. So if you see the track changes of the human editor, you see that the human editor has actually made very few changes just to make the language, acceptable. Whereas ChatGPT has completely turned the text and it has completely edited the text in a very high intervention manner, and thereby it completely has lost the voice of the researcher. The tone of the researcher is completely gone if you see that. Yes, let's go to the next slide. So basically ChatGPT almost rewrote the text and it added new text that was not present in the original statement. Whether that new text is accurate or not has to be checked by the human. The author's voice is completely changed. It has added redundant information, but the human editor has ensured that the author's voice is retained and no incorrect information has been added. So these are some of the examples that we found that, it was necessary to share with the audience just to tell you at what stage GPT is right now and how we should be using it cautiously. So yes, I think that's the end of the presentation. Thank you so much to the panel again. It was wonderful chatting with all of you. I hope you all had fun. Yes. And
this was wonderful. Thank you for the opportunity, Anupma.
Thank you, Chavi. Thank you.
Thank you too.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Trinka.
Thank you.
So, thank you so much to the audience, and we'll be back next week with another episode of the webinar. So thank you so much. Bye, guys. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.